Ilara moved through the silent corridors of Novara Station with careful steps, extra boots whispering against the metal grating. Each morning she arrived before dawn, when the bright neon signs still glowed in soft blues and greens, and the only sound was the faint hum of the station's life support. She preferred this quiet time, when she could slip into her workshop and lose herself in circuits and wires. To her, the low lights and gentle hum felt like an embrace, safe, predictable, and kind. Unlike the crowded social decks where alien suitors had turned away from her again and again. Since she was a child, Ilara had known she was different. Her large, curiosity-filled eyes reflected more than just the station's lights. They held questions and hopes that many found unsettling. On Novaris, most beings prized elegance, flawless symmetry, and carefully measured words. Ilara's earnest smile and open heart made her seem too raw, too honest. When she offered friendship, the response was polite but distant. Invitations. 2 dances or dining pods came wrapped in formality and always ended with excuses. Each maybe next time felt like a gentle but solid door closing. She remembered the whispering rumors. Ilara is kind, but too simple. Her passions are too deep for polite society. These voices followed her like a shadow, even in the brightest corridors. Yet she never allowed bitterness to settle. In her chest, instead, she poured her energy into refining her work, tiny sensors that could detect the faintest shifts in the station's air pressure, or microchips that made the old food replicators run smoother. Station engineers spoke of her talent in low voices. She is brilliant, they admitted, but she keeps to herself. That thought made Ilara ache more than any rejection. As the station prepared for the Cultural Accord Summit, Ilara watched the preparations with a bittersweet longing. Delegates from dozens of planets would arrive soon, each representing a different race, each bringing elaborate gifts and practiced smiles. She felt a flutter of hope that maybe this time someone would notice her strength, but she swallowed it down and focused on soldering a delicate circuit board, her fingers steady, her mind calm. Late one evening, a soft chime announced the docking of the human envoy vessel. Ilara paused, heart fluttering. Humans were rare guests, her own predictable, warm, and full of genuine curiosity. She had read their reports. They laughed easily, asked countless questions, and valued sincerity above polished manners. A small smile touched her lips. Perhaps this summit would be different. Still, she could not let herself drift into daydreams. She wiped her brow, straightened the wires under the microscope, and worked until the board clicked into perfect alignment. Only then did she allow herself a moment to breathe. She closed her eyes and imagined standing in the station's central rotunda, surrounded by swirling holograms and shining panels, confident in her own skin. In that vision, she spoke openly, and others listened. She felt her chest swell with a warmth that was not fear. The next morning, Ilara gathered her tools and gloves and stepped out into the softly lit corridor. The station was alive with activity. Now, mechanical helpers rolled past, carrying crates of exotic fruits and fabrics. Distant laughter floated through airlocks. Somewhere ahead, voices spoke in many tongues, creating a tapestry of sound. For a moment, Ilara's heart thundered, not from panic, but from excitement she had not felt in years. She paused at the entrance to the maintenance bay and looked back at her workshop door, sturdy and reliable. Then she took a deep breath and stepped forward, determined to meet the challenges this summit would bring. Whether her heart soared or broke, she would greet each moment with her true self, earnest, hopeful, and unafraid. In that choice lay her strength, even if no one else had seen it before. Ilara arrived early at the shuttle bay, her heart fluttering as she carried a stack of technical manuals and data pads. She had spent the night reviewing every protocol for the Cultural Accord Summit, determined to shine in her work even if social. Dances still frightened her. The vast bay was dimly lit, the glow of docking clamps and hull plating creating long shadows on the floor. She paused beside the airlock where the human envoy shuttle had docked. A soft hiss announced the opening of the hatch, and Ilara's breath caught in her throat. From the shuttle stepped Lieutenant Mara Hayes, tall in her crisp uniform and Moving with easy confidence, Mara's eyes were bright with curiosity as she scanned the bay, and when they settled on Alara, she offered a warm, open smile. "You must be the Novaran engineer in charge of maintenance," Mara said in gentle tones that carried the faintest lilt of human accent. Her voice was neither formal nor distant. It felt like an invitation. Alara's pulse quickened. No other suitor had ever greeted her so kindly, so without ceremony. Mara stepped forward and extended her hand. Alara hesitated, then placed her slender fingers in the human's grasp. The warmth of the handshake surprised her, and she felt an unexpected surge of courage. "Yes," Alara replied, her voice soft but steady. "I am Alara Vosh. Welcome to Novara Station." She realized her greeting sounded more confident than usual, and she dared to meet Mara's eyes instead of looking away. As they walked toward the central rotunda, Mara asked gentle questions about the station's layout, the biodomes, and the old food replicators that sometimes needed repairs. Alara answered each question with care, explaining the humming engines behind the walls and the hidden sensors that kept everyone safe. When she faltered over a technical term, Mara simply smiled and leaned in closer, as if eager to learn, not judging her hesitation. Alara found herself relaxing, her shoulders lowering from the tense position they held so often. They reached a corridor lined with shimmering panels, showing swirling holographic art. "This place is beautiful," Mara said, stopping to admire the display. Alara looked at the panels with new eyes, noticing the gentle waves of light that reminded her of ocean tides. "Help maintain those projectors," she confessed. They were tricky to balance. Mara turned to her, excitement in her voice. "Show me how. I want to understand what makes Novara special." She reached out to tap the panel, and a soft ripple of color spread across the wall. Alara approached and showed Mara the access port behind a hidden panel. With calm confidence, she pointed out the delicate coils and explained how minor adjustments could shift the hologram's hue. Mara listened intently, her head tilting as she absorbed every word. When Alara demonstrated how a single recalibration could make the art glow more warmly, Mara's eyes lit up. "That is amazing," she breathed. "You have a real gift." Alara felt a flush of pride she had never known outside her workshop. As they continued their tour, Alara realized how effortless it was to speak with Mara. There was no pretense, no polite distance, just genuine interest. When Mara laughed at a small joke Alara made about the replicator's temperamental attitude toward noodles, Lara's chest tightened with joy. She laughed too, the sound echoing softly down the corridor. For the first time, she did not feel the usual sharp pang of self-doubt. By the time they reached the maintenance bay's entrance, the sun reflected through the station's orbital windows bathed them in a soft, golden light. Lara paused, thinking of the lonely nights alone among her wires and circuits. No. Beside this human who saw her talent and treated her with warmth, the station did not feel so vast and empty. She realized that connection could be simple. A smile, a question, a shared moment of laughter. Lara felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. Perhaps this summit would be different after all. Alara stepped into the lush biodome with Mara at her side, feeling the warm mist settle on her skin. The air smelled of sweet orchids and wild ferns, a stark change from the sterile metal halls she knew so well. She paused on a winding path of smooth stones, her heart fluttering with both excitement and nervousness. Mara looked around in wonder, her eyes wide as she touched a glowing flower petal. "It's beautiful," Mara whispered. Alara nodded, brushing a lock of hair from her face, and led the way deeper into the green world. Came to a small rock pool filled with glowing algae. Mara knelt beside it, fingers hovering just above the water's surface. "Why do you spend so much time with machines, Alara?" she asked softly. "Why not stay here among living things?" Alara's breath caught. No one had ever asked her that before. She stared into the rippling light of the pool, then found her voice. "Machines never judge me," she said. "They do exactly what I ask. They listen without questions or doubts." Her words trembled on the air, as if afraid to be heard. Mara looked at her with gentle eyes. But don't you worry they might break, or that someone might think you hide behind metal and wires. Ilara shook her head. I worry about people, she admitted. I fear they will not understand. Me, I fear they will see my feelings as a weakness. She swallowed hard, feeling tears prick at her eyes. With machines, I know the rules. I know how to speak their language. With people, I never know if I say the right thing. Mara rose and took Ilara's hand. The touch surprised Ilara, electric and warm. On Earth, Mara began, her voice soft and kind. We come from many cultures. Some value strength, some value beauty, and some value knowledge. But above all, we value honesty. She paused beside a tall fern and brushed its fronds with her fingers. We believe that showing your true self, your hopes, your fears, your dreams, is the greatest gift you can give another being. It builds trust stronger than any metal frame. Ilara looked up, hope shimmering in her chest. But what if someone does not accept that gift? She asked quietly. What if they see my truth and turn away? Mara smiled, squeezing her hand. Then they were never meant to hold it, she said. But some will treasure it, and those are the ones worth your time. She led Ilara to a clearing where soft light filtered through crystal leaves. Here, she said, pointing to a ring of stones. Humans often share stories under the sky. We speak our truths and listen to others. It brings us close, even across great distances. Ilara knelt on one stone, breathing in the warm light. She closed her eyes, imagining herself opening her heart. She saw the lonely nights she spent in her workshop, soldering circuits under flickering lights. She remembered the polite smiles that hid polite rejections. Now, with Mara's words in her mind, she felt a quiet courage bloom. She opened her eyes and met Mara's gaze. I want to try, she said, her voice steady. I want to show who I really am. Mara's smile was like sunrise. She offered Ilara a small, glowing seed pod harvested from the biodome's trees. Share this, she said. It is called a truth seed. On Earth, we give them when we speak from the heart. Ilara held the pod carefully, its warmth pulsing in her palm. She felt tears slip down her cheeks, tears of relief, of joy, of hope. Thank you, she whispered. They rose together and walked back toward the domes. Exit, the seed pod cradled between them. Ilara felt lighter than she had in years, as if she carried only possibility instead of fear. She knew the summit's crowds would still watch her, still judge her. But now she carried a truth seed and a human's kindness to guide her. In that moment, she believed that her difference was her strength, and that her open heart could build bridges across any galaxy. Late one evening, a sudden tremor rippled through Novara Station, and the lights winked out as the power grid failed. Ilara and Mara found themselves guided only by the faint glow of emergency beacons as they hurried toward the observation deck. Corridors stretched into darkness, and each step echoed with the station's deep hum winding down. Ilara's heart pounded in her chest. Not from fear of the blackout, but from the uncertain closeness of the human by her side. They reached the deck's massive viewport just as the emergency lights flickered on, painting the room in soft red hues. Beyond the thick glass, the gas giant's swirling clouds glowed with green and purple auroras. The sight took Ilara's breath away, but she could barely focus on the colors. Mara stood beside her, calm and steady, her silhouette outlined by the shifting lights. For a moment, neither spoke as the cosmic dance played out in silence. Then Mara broke the quiet with a gentle question. Ilara, what do you wish for right now? Her voice floated across the small space, warm and caring. Ilara's throat tightened. She had practiced 1,000 technical explanations, but had never practiced sharing her heart. The hum of the station felt distant, and her skin tingled at the thought of revealing something so personal. She swallowed and met Mara's gaze. I wish I did not feel so alone, Ilara confessed, her voice low and honest. The words trembled, like a fragile circuit on the edge of breaking. I wish someone would see me, not for my work or my skills, but for who I am inside. I wish someone would stay when they hear my fears and not turn away. Tears glistened in her eyes, reflecting the dancing aurora beyond the glass. Mara stepped closer and placed a light hand on Elara's shoulder. Her touch was gentle but sure, like the steady pulse of life's support systems. "Thank you for sharing that," she said softly. "It takes strength to speak what is in your heart." Lara felt warmth spread through her chest, not from the emergency heaters, but from the simple act of being heard. Mara pointed to the sky, where a bright streak of light traced across the clouds. "On Earth, we call that a shooting star," she explained. "Many people make a wish when they see one. But the true magic comes when we share our wishes with someone who listens." Ilara watched the glowing trail fade, then turned back to Mara, her fear replaced by a quiet hope. They sat on the curved bench beneath the viewport, the seed pod from the biodome clutched in Ilara's hand. Her fingers closed around it almost without thinking. "I planted this seed in the hope it would grow into something real," Ilara murmured. "I wanted a chance to show my truth." Mara nodded and reached out to cradle Elara's hand, the seed resting between them. Together they watched the aurora, neither alone. In the gentle glow of emergency lights, Elara felt courage bloom inside her. The walls she built to protect her heart began to shift, like the holographic panels in the rotunda she had once repaired. She realized that vulnerability was not weakness, it was a bridge. And here, under the swirling skies of Novara Station, someone had met her in the middle. When the station's power flickered back to life, the deck brightened with crisp white light, the auroras faded, but the warmth between Ilara and Mara did not. Ilara stood taller, her shoulders squared with newfound confidence. She still carried her fears, but now she knew she did not face them alone. And as the station hummed normal again, Ilara dared to believe that second chances were not just for machines, but for hearts as well. Ilara arrived at the Grand Summit Hall just as the holographic display sputtered and dimmed. The showcase was due to begin in minutes, and dignitaries from dozens of worlds waited silently, their eyes flicking between the darkened panels and the nervous engineers huddled by the control console. Ilara's heart hammered. She had designed most of the station's wiring for these projectors, but never under such pressure. When the chief technician's voice trembled over the "Come, we can't restore full power in time," Lara felt a cold weight settle in her chest. Mara Hayes, standing beside her in the maintenance bay doorway, caught Ilara's eye and offered a steadying nod. "Let me help," Mara said, her tone quiet but firm. Ilara blinked in surprise. She had fixed countless machines alone, but she had never invited someone to join in her work. Now, seeing Mara's earnest face, Ilara took a steadying breath and said, "All right, let's do this together." They crouched before the console, Mara leaning over the schematic datapad while Ilara pried open a side panel. A tangle of silver conduits and glowing fiber lines spilled into view. Ilara pointed to a tiny fuse that had blown, its edges charred. Mara tapped the datapad, pulling up an Earth-standard replacement module. "We need to reroute power through these circuits until we can swap it out," Mara said, her voice calm and clear. "On Earth, we sometimes improvise like this." Ilara nodded and pushed aside a bundle of wires. Together, they guided a thin power braid over the damaged section. Ilara's fingers trembled as she soldered the braid's end. Sparks flickered, and for a moment, the station's lights stuttered again. She swallowed, glancing at Mara. Mara smiled and placed a hand on Ilara's shoulder. "You're doing great," she whispered. Ilara closed her eyes for a heartbeat, letting Mara's confidence flow into her. When she opened them, her movements were sure. She sealed the solder joint, slid the panel back into place, and tapped the console screen. The hall's lights surged on in a wash of color as the hologram roared to life. Whirling galaxies and shifting constellations floated mid-air, bathing the room in soft blues and greens. The crowd gasped in unison, then burst into applause that echoed off steel walls. Ilara felt warmth flood her face. She looked at Mara, whose grin was as bright as the display. In that instant, Ilara understood the power of partnership. After the applause died down, the station commander strode forward and asked for the engineers responsible. Ilara stood, chest tight with pride, and spoke clearly. Lieutenant Hayes and I repaired the circuit together. Mara nodded and added, her design work made this possible. I just lent a human touch. The commander's stern features softened as he placed a hand on Alara's shoulder. Well done, he said. This is a true example of unity. Back in the rotunda later, Alara walked through the crowd with Mara by her side. Aliens of many shapes and sizes approached, congratulating them both. Alara answered questions about her precision work and about how she and Mara collaborated. Each time she spoke, she felt her confidence grow. She realized that her worth was not hidden behind wires, but shone through her willingness to share her knowledge and to learn from another. That night, Alara returned to her workshop with a lightness she had not felt in years. She sat at her bench and gazed at the soldering iron, no longer a tool of solitude, but a bridge between minds. She smiled to herself, thinking of Mara's laughter and the hall's bright lights. In her hands, she held a new truth, that true strength came not only from her skill with machines, but from the connections she forged. And as she carefully placed a fresh circuit board into its slot, Alara felt more alive than ever, ready to build not only better systems, but better bonds across the stars. Alara stepped into the central rotunda the next morning, her heart steady and her shoulders straight. The grand hall was bathed in soft morning light that filtered through the curved windows. Delegates and station staff bustled around the holographic fountains, their bright displays shimmering like stars. Alara carried herself with calm pride, knowing she had something new to share her own story as she walked beside Mara. Several Novaran engineers nodded with respect. One placed a gentle hand on her arm and said, "We heard about your work last night. You were brilliant." Alara smiled and bowed her head. She felt warmth bloom in her chest. For years, she had hidden behind technical terms and quiet focus. Now, she spoke freely, letting her voice carry her confidence. Across the room, small clusters of curious onlookers gathered. A tall, feathered diplomat approached and asked, "Lieutenant Hayes says you led the repair. How did you find the courage?" Alara took a breath and looked the diplomat in the eyes. "I trusted someone to stand with me," she replied. "When we work together, we can do more than any one being alone." Our words were simple, but they felt powerful. Mara squeezed Alara's hand and added, "Alara taught me so much about precision and care. I just helped her shine." The diplomat smiled warmly and bowed. "Then we celebrate both of you." Alara realized that partnership bridged the gap between species. She no longer felt a wall between herself and others. It was a stepping stone. Later, by a circle of alien delegates, Alara was asked about her life on Novara Station. She spoke of her workshop, of the circuits and soldering irons, but also of her lonely nights. She spoke of fear, of wondering if she would ever be understood. As she told her truth, she felt protesters of doubt fall away. Every sentence lifted her higher. When she finished, the delegation leader, a silver-skinned envoy with gentle eyes, said, "Your honesty is refreshing. We invite you to join our cultural exchange panel." Alara's chest swelled with pride. In surprise, she nodded, her voice steady. "I would be honored." In that moment, she realized her value was not hidden behind machines, but was in her open heart. As the summit progressed, other aliens approached Alara with questions about her truth seed from the biodome. She showed them the small pod Mara had given her and explained its meaning. Many smiled and offered their own tokens, seed pods from distant worlds, woven charms, and tiny sculptures. Alara's workshop tool became a symbol of connection. That afternoon, Alara and Mara sat together at a long table for the cultural panel. Alara's hands trembled slightly, but Mara gave her a reassuring nod. When it was her turn, Alara spoke clearly about the power of honesty and the strength found in sharing fears and hopes. Eyes in the audience softened, and many nodded. Alara's simple words echoed like gentle music. When the panel ended, delegates mingled to share stories. Alara listened and laughed, feeling part of something larger than herself. For the first time, she did not shrink back from conversation. She stepped forward with ease, offering her thoughts and listening to others. Each exchange felt like a handshake of hearts. As evening fell, the rotunda lights dimmed and transformed into a soft glow. Delegates gathered for a closing ceremony. Under faux twilight, Lara stood beside Mara, the seed pod in her palm. She looked at the assembled crowd and spoke one last time. "Thank you for listening, for joining me in honesty. Together, we can build bridges across any distance." Words hung in the air like promise. Applause rose around her, gentle and steady. Ilara felt tears of joy in her eyes, but they were not tears of fear. They were tears of triumph. She realized she had grown stronger, not by hiding, but by standing tall and speaking her truth. And as the crowd's light faded into gentle applause, Ilara felt ready for whatever the stars would bring next. Ilara stood at the edge of the star-bright plaza, her heart fluttering with excitement as twilight painted the station's curved windows in soft purples and pinks. Around her, delegates from countless worlds shared music, stories, and laughter. Beneath floating lanterns that drifted like tiny comets, she wore her work overalls rather than a formal gown, and for the first time, she did not feel out of place. Beside her, Lieutenant Mara Hayes offered a gentle smile and passed Ilara a steaming cup of sweet spiced tea, human tradition. Mara had learned on Earth to calm nerves and warm spirits. Mara leaned close and whispered, "They're waiting." "For you." Ilara glanced toward the human delegation's pavilion, where a circle of chairs faced a low stage draped in soft, silvery cloth. Human envoys greeted her with open arms, their faces bright with welcome. Ilara's breath caught. She had never imagined that her simple self-fan engineer who preferred circuits to crowds could stand among speakers and be celebrated for her honest heart. Yet here she was, not as a mere technician, but as a voice for connection across species. Slowly she stepped forward, the lantern light reflecting in her large, hopeful eyes. The crowd hushed as she reached the center of the circle. Mara slipped an arm around her shoulders, a quiet anchor in the gentle chaos. Ilara raised the cup to her lips, savoring the spice's warmth, and then set it down, folding her hands in front of her. She remembered the lonely nights in her workshop, the sting of polite rejections, and the fear that her true self would never be enough. She felt those fears dissolve into purpose. Clearing her throat softly, she began to speak. In her clear, gentle voice on Novara Station, "I once thought I had to hide behind my machines, behind flawless circuits to be worthy. I believed that my honesty, my simple smile, was not enough. But I learned that truth is stronger than steel and more precious than any gem. When Lieutenant Hayes reached out her hand, she showed me that my heart, my real self, could build bridges across any distance." Her words floated across the plaza like petals on a breeze, and in the silence that followed, she felt every eye upon her as a promise, not a threat. A warm murmur rippled through the crowd. A young human envoy stepped forward and placed a soft, woven bracelet on Ilara's wrist, a gift symbolizing friendship. Then an insectoid diplomat offered a tiny vial of glowing pollen that would bloom into a living flower when planted. One by one, beings of all shapes approached, offering tokens of their worlds, a crystal shard humming with distant starlight, a small, carved statue of a moon goddess, and even a delicate song played on an alien wind instrument. Ilara's chest swelled as she received these gifts, each one a testament to the connections she had formed. When the circle closed, Mara squeezed Ila's hand and said, "Welcome to our exchange." They guided Ilara onto the low stage, where she shared her tea with the first to speak, a young diplomat from the desert planet Arrakis. Ilara listened to stories of shifting sands and ancient oases, and then she shared her own tale of midnight soldering and whispered dreams. Laughter and gentle applause rose like music. The lanterns drifted higher, casting soft light on faces lifted toward the stars beyond the windows. As the night deepened, Ilara realized that she had not only found acceptance, but had become a beacon. Herself, her humble words kindled hope in others, proving that honesty and courage could unite even the most distant hearts. When the final envoy offered her a small star map, a promise of future meetings among the FD Cellera, accepted it with tears of joy. In that moment, she understood that her life had changed forever. Rejected by all alien males, one human had shown her the power of kindness, and in turn, she had given the galaxy a gift, a simple, earnest heart brave enough to shine across the stars.